Lord Voldemort, Jeff Bezos, Ellen DeGenerate, all people known for their unforgivable crimes against humanity. These are people with a vision, but more than that, these are people with the guts to see their vision through, as is the case with two American pioneers of a radium dial industry, Dr. Sabin Arnold von Cichocki and Dr. George S. Willis. In 1914, these gentlemen founded a business that made watches with glow-in-the-dark dials and numbers. As you can imagine, having a watch that can glow in the dark would be super useful in a primitive age such as the 1910s. World War I had just broken out and the military needed a way to tell time at night so they could coordinate nighttime attacks. As well as the military, everyday people were super interested in the glow-in-the-dark, something that seemed magical at the time. The only problem was the glow-in-the-dark paint glowed because of a newly discovered element called radium. Radium was discovered by Marie Curie in 1910 and was named by her after the word radiation, which radium emitted a lot of. In fact, the half-life of radium is 1600 years, which means radium is able to emit a constant dangerous dose of radiation for thousands of years before it becomes safe for us humans. However, in the early 1900s, it wasn't widely known that the use of radium was negative for your health. In fact, there was a widespread notion that radium actually enhanced your body in some way. Advertisers would go around saying it was a cure for all diseases, that made you more attractive, and would make you live much longer. There is somewhat of an ostensible basis for these claims, since even back then, the medicinal effects of radium were known, such as the fact that it was an effective treatment against cancer. Soon enough, it was popular amongst the public to drink radium water, eat radium-infused butter, and add radium to their toothpaste. Many advertisers claimed radium would make you glow, but consumers were often surprised when their skin would quite literally glow a pale green for several hours after using a radium product before the toxic metal was eventually flushed out of their system. This all came to head when the US Radium Corporation hired teenage girls to paint the dials of watches with the glow-in-the-dark paint. These women were used because their tiny hands made it easier to paint numbers onto the watches more accurately. Along with this benefit, the women often made up to 3 times more than the average non-educated woman could make at this time. They felt useful in the war effort since many of the watches were used by military men in the First World War. The factory managers started telling these workers to squish the radium brush in between their lips to make a fine point so they could paint numbers more accurately. This technique, called lip dipping or lip pointing, indirectly caused a portion of the radium paint to be ingested by these women. Although small doses weren't very harmful to these workers, constant exposure to radium, especially at the doses they were taking, led to some incredibly cynical side effects. These women would often paint up to 200 watches a day, 5.5 days a week for years, and when you lip dip each number on 200 watches, you ingest an incredible amount of radium. People had been dying from radium for years before the first glow-in-the-dark paint shop opened up. Marie and Pierre Curie famously both testified that radium is an incredible health hazard, and both of them showed effects of radiation toxicity from the radium they had worked with. Marie actually died from radiation poisoning, and Pierre no doubt would have as well, if it wasn't for a carriage crushing him to death before. Of course, the US Radium Corporation knew the dangers of radium. They even ran tests that proved its toxicity. However, when questioned by the court, they conveniently said they never heard of any negative effects of radium, and because they owned these tests, the tests could not be used as evidence. As a result, the radium toxicity was able to provably claim the lives of over 200 women. By the 1920s, many women were beginning to show signs of the disease, one of the first being Amelia Molly Maggia. Amelia was suffering from a toothache, so the dentist pulled a tooth out, then another one, and then painful ulcers began spreading across her mouth and into her body. Within months, she was unable to walk, and by May 1922, it is said her entire jaw, roof of her mouth, and up to her ear bone were all one giant abscess. When a dentist gently prodded her jawbone with his fingers, her jaw cracked and dislocated itself. The dentist later removed her entire jawbone at once by softly pulling it out. Amelia died just 4 days later. There is a bit of chemistry to be known here. Since radium and calcium are both alkaline earth metals, they bond with the same things. This is because both radium and calcium carry 2 valence electrons, or 2 electrons in their outer shells. Because of this, our body has a tough time distinguishing between the 2 elements, and much radium is fused into bone. Although your body has a tough time distinguishing between these elements, it still tries to only use calcium in its bones. Most ingested radium is extracted from the body, and only a small portion of the radium actually stays in the bones, which is why you need many repeat exposures to build up a large enough level of radium that your body can become vulnerable. With that being said, the radium that makes it into your bones can't be easily extracted, and instead of strengthening your bones, the radioactivity weakens the bones, often shortening them and turning the insides of the bones into a honeycomb pattern. With the evidence against US Radium Corporation rising, US Radium publicly attacked the girls of making up their diseases in order to gain money. They claimed the girls had syphilis, a low blow that made people view the girls as less credible due to the reputation of contracting an STD. With that being said, an attorney was hired and US Radium was sued for $250,000 each. However, they eventually settled out of court for $10,000 each and $600 annually for every year after that they survived, around $150,000 today. With this victory, women around the world rose up and demanded compensation from the radium workshops they worked at, and finally, the final radium company shut down in 1938. It was too late. At this time, over 78 women had already died from radiation sickness, and hundreds were showing symptoms. Over the course of time, around 200 deaths were provably linked to radium poisoning. All in all, just another tragedy linked to unethical business practices. Anyways, thanks for watching. Big videos coming out soon. Bye everybody.
Welcome home, Master. Your balls look mighty heavy today.
I'll carry them.